Tonight, the tale of the tape as former President Trump faces down multiple indictments. The property manager at Mar-a-Lago, who was allegedly instructed by Trump to delete surveillance videos, released on a $100,000 bond. Trump lashing out on social media, denying those allegations as he faces 40 counts of his own in the same case. Plus, what we're hearing tonight about the possibility of 2 additional indictments in Washington and Georgia. The Trump bump. Those swirling legal battles not slowing down the former president's 2024 campaign. A new poll showing Trump with a 37-point lead over Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. The rest of the field even farther behind. What we're hearing tonight from the GOP contenders still looking to break through. Also breaking late today, tragic news out of California. Actor Angus Cloud, best known for his role on Euphoria, dead at the age of 25. The details just coming in. Targeting migrants, surveillance video showing the moment a black SUV plowed into a group of migrant workers in a Walmart parking lot. Tonight, you'll hear from one of the 6 people injured as police search for that driver who fled the scene. Netanyahu one-on-one, or Raf Sanchez pressing the Israeli prime minister about the judicial overhaul that has divided his country, angering Israelis and triggering nationwide protests. What the embattled leader said about the possibility of a civil war. Plus, kidnapped in Haiti, an American nurse and her child taken from the campus of a nonprofit where she worked with her husband. The abduction happening the same day the U.S. issued its highest travel alert, urging Americans to leave the country. The desperate effort underway to bring that mother and daughter to safety. And rapper Cardi B under investigation for battery for whipping a microphone at a fan who threw water at her face. What we're hearing from Las Vegas PD about the latest incident in a string of bad behavior at concerts. Top story starts right now. And good evening. We thank you for joining us here on Top Story on this Monday night. It's already been a busy week for former President Trump as he faces multiple criminal investigations in different jurisdictions. So we want to walk you through where things stand right now. We begin first with the probe into Trump's handling of classified documents after he left the presidency. You remember those images of documents spilling out of boxes inside Mar-a-Lago? Well, tonight, the property manager, you see him here at that Florida estate, Carlos de Oliveira, released on a $100,000 bond after being charged allegedly with trying to delete surveillance video on Trump's orders. The former president facing 40 counts of his own in that same probe. And Trump also under investigation for his actions on January 6th and broader efforts to overturn the 2020 election by a grand jury in Washington, D.C. A decision on whether to indict or not apparently imminent. Trump himself posting on Truth Social that he assumes an indictment is coming, quote, any day now. And late today, the district attorney in Fulton County, Georgia, also looking into election interference, says an indictment in that state could come by the end of August. But as these legal troubles mount, Trump as a candidate seeming to surge in popularity with his party, actually getting a boost in the polls. The latest from the New York Times showing him with a significant lead over his GOP challengers. Look at that. Even Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, a distant second. We'll have much more of that polling in a moment, but first, here's NBC's Garrett Haake, who covers the Trump campaign.
Indicted Mar-a-Lago employee Carlos de Oliveira free tonight on a $100,000 bond, entering no plea during a first hearing in federal court in Miami. Prosecutors say he sought to delete surveillance video subpoenaed as part of the classified documents case. De Oliveira allegedly telling another Mar-a-Lago staffer, quote, the boss wanted the video deleted. Mr. Trump, who now faces 40 separate counts in the case, posting, Mar-a-Lago tapes were not deleted. They were voluntarily handed over. I never told anybody to delete them.
These are ridiculous indictments.
The former president this weekend lashing out at those charges to which he has pleaded not guilty and at the federal prosecutors who may bring another indictment regarding his actions before January 6th. Writing, he expects to be indicted, quote, any day now, arguing charges are being revealed now because he's the Republican frontrunner against President Biden.
They waited 2.5, almost 3 years so that they could bring him right in the middle of my presidential election because it's election interference. These are crooked people.
The Attorney General appointed a special counsel to take over the DOJ investigation 3 days after Mr. Trump announced his campaign. while the DA leading a similar probe in Georgia now says an indictment there could come by the end of August.
We're ready to go.
As his legal challenges mount, the Washington Post reporting Mr. Trump's political group spent more than $40 million on legal costs in the first half of 2023, defending the former president and his allies. Some of Mr. Trump's rivals now intensifying their attacks.
These guys were acting like the Corleones with no experience.
I think we need a new leader. I think he was good then. I don't think he's going to be good going forward.
Garrett Haake joins us tonight from Washington. And Garrett, there's been some talk now that with President Trump hit with those new charges in the classified documents case, could he potentially appear in a Florida courtroom yet again?
It's possible, Tom, but it seems unlikely. Typically, a defendant would have a chance to be arraigned again in a case like this with new charges, particularly if they want to change their plea. But there's no indication Donald Trump wants to do that, and he certainly wants to keep up a campaign schedule rather than appear in a Florida courtroom. So it's likely he'll waive his opportunity for an appearance. Not impossible that he'll show up.
And then I don't know if you know the answer to this, but there are so many different court cases going, several of them originating out of the DOJ. You have the court case in Georgia that you mentioned as well. Are these prosecutors coordinating their timelines?
Well, Fani Willis, the Georgia DA, is the only one who's spoken about this publicly, and she says no. In fact, she says she's never spoken to Jack Smith, wouldn't recognize him if she ran into him, doesn't think he would know how to pronounce her name correctly. But that lack of coordination could lead to a bit of a traffic jam, perhaps as early as next week. That's when the window that Willis has talked about would open up for her to start her work with the grand jury. If we have multiple indictments in a week, or perhaps 2 arraignments in 2 different cities next week, this could all come to a head very abruptly, Tom, without the kind of coordination that Willis says is not happening.
All right, Garrett Haake for us. Garrett, we appreciate that. With a third potential indictment looming, President Trump's seen a surge of support from his base in the Republican Party. New polling showing him with a commanding lead in the GOP primary, and the major warning signs tonight for his biggest challenger, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Monica Alba tonight reporting from Washington with all the new numbers.
Tonight, as Donald Trump's legal challenges intensify, so does his grip on the Republican Party. A New York Times Siena College poll out today showing the former president dominating the GOP field.
We're up by a lot.
54% of Republican voters backing Mr. Trump over his primary opponents and giving him a whopping 37-point edge over his chief rival, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis.
DeSantis is gone. He's just about over. I think if he ever made a comeback, it would be the greatest comeback in political history.
Trump's advantage so strong that even in a head-to-head matchup with DeSantis and no other candidates to split the anti-Trump vote, he's still up by 31 points.
If you're up by so much, you would not be worried about anybody else.
The Florida governor over the weekend on defense.
When he hits me with the juvenile insults, I think that helps me. It's just a reminder why there's so many millions of voters who will never vote for him going forward.
A closer look inside the poll shows troubling signs for DeSantis with key GOP demographics. Only 9% of Republicans 65 and older support DeSantis, along with just 13% without a college degree. And self-described very conservative Republicans break for Trump over DeSantis 65-15.
His main promises, draining the swamp, having Mexico build the border wall, locking Hillary up and eliminating the debt, he did not follow through on those promises. That's just the reality.
With the first debate of the primary season just weeks away, all eyes will be on DeSantis in what may be a make-or-break moment for him. And it's still unclear whether Trump will even show up.
We're not just going to be in the debate, but we're going to be in the fight.
Other candidates fighting to make it onto the stage. Former Vice President Mike Pence still struggling to reach the 40,000 donor requirement to participate.
I think, we're maybe a couple of weeks away, based on the pace of things coming in, because our focus is on the campaign. We're closing in on it, and confident we'll be in the debate.
Pence, Nikki Haley, Tim Scott, Vivek Ramaswamy, and Chris Christie all failing to surpass 3%. Texas Congressman Will Hurd polling at less than 1% while taking on the frontrunner at an Iowa campaign stop.
Donald Trump is not running for president to represent the people that voted for him in 2016 and 2020. Donald Trump is running to stay out of prison. And if we elect
And Tom, the DeSantis camp is blasting Trump over that new reporting that he used more than $40 million in campaign donations on legal fees. A DeSantis campaign spokesperson writing online, Trump is using more than $60 million on two things: falsely attacking DeSantis and paying his own legal fees. Not a cent on defeating Biden. But despite that new line of attack, still plenty of ground to make up for the Florida governor. Tom?
All right, Monica Alba, great to see you, Monica. And with the president still, President Trump, I should say, former President Trump, still the apparent front runner, can other candidates turn the tide with more than 5 months to go until early state primaries? I want to bring in our panel tonight, political strategist Rina Shah. She served as an RNC delegate in 2016, an NBC News political contributor and former chief strategist for the 2004 Bush-Cheney campaign, and a friend of Top Story, Matt Dowd. Thank you to you both for being here tonight. Rina, I'm going to start with you. We see the former president blowing his competition out of the water right now in these polls. But in a Quinnipiac national poll released July 30th, 2015, look at this. President Trump was polling at 20%. Former Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker had 13%. Former Florida Governor Jeb Bush had 10%, and we go on and on. I bring this up, Rina, to show you that back in 2015, he was even further. He was ahead, but he wasn't as ahead as he is now. And now he has a monster lead. Is there any chance for people like Governor Ron DeSantis to come ahead?
Anything could happen. We are still so early out, and that's the part that everybody seems to forget. Right this moment, we have this crowded field, what feels a bit of a clown car, and then you've got the biggest clown at the top, right? This is a situation in which nobody can expect how this really plays out, because right now we are looking at a former president who is thrice indicted, and how that really hits the consciousness of the Republican electorate that has stood by him through 2 impeachments and all kinds of other things. We have to think of this moment as too big to foretell what the future holds for him. Because in reality, there's this. You've got this hardcore MAGA base that everybody says rules the party. Well, we have the empirical evidence that shows that MAGA continues to dwindle in size. And then you've got the other faction of the party that genuinely wants something else, but they don't know what that something else is. And at this point in the race, what we know is that there could be an entryway at any moment. Could it be something legal that creates that entryway? Could it be money woes that create an entryway, or simply just luck? I think right now, I know a lot of younger Republicans have an appetite for somebody else in this crowded field, but right now, Trump seeks it out because he knows that having that moniker of former president is something that really continues to help him, and him taking that soapbox every day with that former title also continues to help.
So, Matt, I want to ask you, does Rina have a point here? Because if we go even further back to this time in 2007, you have a candidate by the name of Rudy Giuliani who is leading the polls in the Republican field. Behind him is Fred Thompson. And, of course, John McCain would come from behind and win that primary and take on former President Obama. So is there still time for someone to turn this around?
I think all of those past things where Republicans who were leading then ended up losing were all at the margins and up there ahead. No Republican in the last 50 years who had a lead like Donald Trump has ever lost the nomination. I'm going to say that again. No Republican with his lead has ever lost the nomination in this. And it's not just he's got a huge lead over Ron DeSantis and the rest of the field has dwindled. He's also more popular today among Republicans than he was in 2016 when he won the nomination. And in 2016, Donald Trump never hit 50% in the polls until he was the nominee of the party in the summer of 2016. He's already at above 50% in the polls. He's gone from leading this field by an average of 15 points up until April to now leading this field by an average of 30 points or more right at this point in time for the last 3 months. He's doubled his lead as the campaign has started in the midst of this. I agree with Rina that it's going to take some external event. I actually think it's going to take what's akin to a meteor, some extinction level event to happen in order for him, not only him to be damaged, but what also has to happen simultaneously is everyone else in the field but one has to survive that extinction level event in order to beat Donald Trump. If you were betting anything, your house, your car, your whatever it happens to be, you would put the money on Donald Trump in time, because if he loses the nomination, it will be an historic loss that we have not seen in our lifetime.
So, Matt, on that point, the New York Times also estimated that I think the MAGA base makes up about 37% of the Republican electorate. And you and I have had this conversation for a long time. If that number holds true, that's even bigger than what he had in 2016.
Yeah, it's 15 points bigger than he had in 2016. And keep in mind, that is 37% that's basically locked in for Donald Trump. I mean, it is locked in. He has another 37% that are favorable to him and would consider him. And so being in a multi-candidate field with 7, 8, 9, or 10 people with a base of support nearly 40%, and then another group of voters who are available to him, it really puts it on the onus on the rest of the candidates. It's going to be very hard to beat him. And if he doesn't enter the debate in August, that's one of the few opportunities, the other candidates have to get themselves known. If he doesn't go, then I don't know where they get the oxygen to win this race.
So, yeah, Rena, on that point, NBC News asked 44 former Trump cabinet officials, about their time with the former president. Only 4 of them said he should be reelected. But does that matter if his base is still willing to show up for him? And really, if you look at that slate of candidates out there that are running against former President Trump, that are running for the GOP nomination, the vast majority of them will not denounce him. So if you don't denounce the president, you don't separate yourself, how do you win this GOP primary?
Not denouncing the former president is sort of this card that many of these candidates think is a winning card. And I couldn't agree less, because this is the reality of this race, is that you've got people that want to make the case for themselves. But I think a lot of them are actually having some regret having jumped in and seeing how hard it is to compete with their colleagues who are here. These are former governors again. These are people who've had a really long resume in public service, and they thought it would go better than this for them at this point in time. They thought that DeSantis would be the guy to topple at this point in the race. All that's been turned on its head. But let's look at why we're where we're at and why so many former Trump officials don't want to take a chance on him again, wouldn't click for him again. It reminds me of the people who voted for Trump in 2016 and maybe even again in 2020, but are saying now no more. So here's this moment where anything could again happen. It's sort of the phrase of the month. It's going to be the phrase of many months to come. But I also say this. Let's also look at the Republican electorate and why we sit where we sit and why anything could happen. It's because you have a Republican electorate that's very much thinking, what about my pocketbook? It's as if they have amnesia of how the Trump administration handled the pandemic in those unusual times, which I think played a big hand in Trump losing in 2020. But they remember the economy and how things felt good and how the cost of living wasn't so high. So therefore, again, we unfairly tie a president to the economy. And we're looking at the Biden administration come out saying everything's great, everything feels great, the economy's doing great. But you've got problems with core inflation. Again, this feeling of the high cost of living, particularly with elder millennials like me who are trying to have the house in the suburbs and have a family too. We're still seeing prices on the grocery shelves and grocery bills feel pretty high. So again, when you look at this type of Republican, they may click for Trump again just because of that feeling of could he take us back to better economic times.
Rena, thank you for that. Yeah, no, I got to get to Matt before we wrap this segment up. Matt, we know the DeSantis campaign has had this overhaul. He's trying to do more one-on-one events, trying to get out there more, listen and talk to voters. Is this what he needs to do?
No, I mean, this is akin to a chef that owns a restaurant and everybody hates the food and nobody likes the chef. And the chef's solution to the problem is to print different colored menus.
Yeah, but Matt, to be fair, he did have, I would argue in your scenario, he had the most popular restaurant before this whole scenario started.
Yeah, but it was the most popular restaurant before people tasted the food. And then once the Republican primary voters tasted the food, they don't want it. I mean, he has to do, it's not firing staff, it's not raising money, it's not tweeting his message. He actually has to do a fundamental overhaul of his own candidacy.
All right, Matt Dowd is getting us hungry talking about foods and restaurants. Rena Shah, welcome to Top Story. We thank you for joining us tonight. I'm sure we will check back with you later in the campaign season. Next tonight, news of the latest regarding Hunter Biden's legal troubles. Devin Archer, Biden's former business partner, on Capitol Hill today, meeting with the House Oversight Committee. Committee members saying that in a closed-door interview, Archer said that Hunter gave the illusion of access to his father and then Vice President Joe Biden while doing business in Ukraine. For more, let's bring in NBC News reporter Gary Grumbach from Washington. Gary, I know you've been covering this in the back and forth between Republicans and Democrats. Obviously, they both have two versions of what they heard or what they were hearing and how they interpret it. Bring us anything new. Did we learn anything about this testimony today?
We did, and yeah, off the top, I want to stress that this was a closed-door interview, so everything we're hearing about it is from the members who were inside the room. But the headline here is that during today's 4-hour meeting, longtime friend and business partner of Hunter Biden, Devon Archer, told members that then Vice President Biden had more than 20 interactions with foreign business leaders, both in person and over the phone, while his son Hunter was on the board of Burisma, that Ukrainian energy company, with Archer. But none of them had to do with business dealings themselves. Instead, Archer apparently told the members the conversations were about the weather, geography, and other pleasantries. Now, Democratic Representative Jamie Raskin also says Archer was unaware of any $5 million payment by a Burisma executive to the Bidens and didn't believe any of the allegations of bribery brought up by Senator Chuck Grassley last week were credible. Republicans, on the other hand, said they thought there was great value in today's interview, saying Archer suggested during his interview that he believed Burisma would have gone out of business if, quote, the brand, referring to then Vice President Joe Biden, wasn't involved. And for their part, the White House is today responding to this appearance by Devon Archer, calling it, quote, an evidence-free wild goose chase.
And then, Gary, before you go, I know you have some new reporting. House Republicans have also launched an investigation into Hunter Biden's plea deal.
That's right. The Republican leaders of the House Judiciary, Oversight, and Ways and Means Committee today sent a 6-page letter to Attorney General Merrick Garland announcing their plans to launch an investigation into what exactly happened in that Delaware courtroom last week and why it happened. They're specifically interested in the provision inside what's called a pretrial diversion agreement, which is basically an agreement between the government and Hunter Biden's attorneys about different ways to avoid jail time, like going to counseling, for example. But it would have forced the judge there to weigh in on whether Hunter Biden breached the agreement, something even the judge said was out of the scope of her authority last week. So the leaders also take issue with an immunity clause within that agreement that would have given Hunter Biden immunity from all other crimes in exchange for completing the pretrial diversion agreement. And the committee leaders are asking Garland to provide information on other pretrial diversion agreements similar to Biden and what they're calling, quote, a generalized description of the department's ongoing investigations concerning Hunter Biden.
On now to North Carolina, where security cameras have captured the shocking moment an SUV plowed into a group of migrant workers. Police are now searching for the suspect, saying the incident appeared to be intentional. One of the men who was hit speaking tonight, and that driver escaped. He's still at large. Juan Venegas has the story.
Tonight, a desperate manhunt for the driver of this SUV after police say he appeared to intentionally ram into a group of farm workers in North Carolina. This video released by Lincolnton Police shows the moment the black SUV slowly makes its way down a Walmart parking lot before making a turn towards the group of workers who were standing in the shade under these trees. The driver then speeding over the curb and striking 6 men. An ambulance then seen arriving, tending to the injured men ranging from ages 21 to 39. All have been treated and released from the hospital and are expected to recover.
Jorge Lopez Anaya.
Among the injured, 33-year-old Jorge Lopez.
Marvel se fue directamente contra nosotros.
He went straight towards us, said Lopez to our Telemundo affiliate. He says the workers were shopping at a local Walmart on their day off when the incident occurred. He now suffers from injuries in his ankle and says he won't be able to work for 2 weeks. We're all here to work hard and make a little bit of money, said Lopez, who, like the other men, is in the U.S. with an H-2A farm worker visa, according to his employer. This weekend's incident reminiscent of a fatal incident in Brownsville, Texas back in May, where 8 migrants were killed after police say a driver under the influence drove into them while they stood outside a migrant shelter. That driver was charged with manslaughter, and authorities are still looking into whether that crash was intentional. But fear now spreading among other farm workers in North Carolina, including the farm where the 6 men work. I'm scared after what's happened, said Jose Benjamin Morales as he took a break from working in the fields today. Lincolnton Police now asking the public for assistance to locate the driver, described as an older white male they say was in an older model mid-SUV with a luggage rack.
And local police say they are working hard to try to identify that driver as fast as possible and share that information with the public. As for the victims that won't be able to work for the next few days, the Mexican consulate says that legal and financial help is available to them if necessary. Tom?
Okay, Juan Venegas for us. Tonight, there is a desperate search also for 2 American citizens reportedly kidnapped inside of Haiti. A New Hampshire nurse and her young child are missing amid increasing violence in the island nation. Our Kristen Dahlgren in her hometown of Middleton, New Hampshire, with the latest details.
Tonight, the fate of 31-year-old nurse Alex Dorsonville and her young daughter named Haven still unknown. The two reportedly abducted in Haiti. The State Department says it is in regular contact with local authorities.
We'll continue to work with them and our U.S. government interagency partners. Obviously, the safety and security of American citizens overseas is our highest priority.
Officials would not, however, release any more details of their ongoing investigation. Dorsonville was in Port-au-Prince working for the nonprofit El Roy, founded by her Haitian-born husband, Sandro.
My name is Alex. I'm a nurse from New Hampshire, but now I live in Haiti.
In a video posted on the organization's website, Dorsonville details the work she had been doing with children at El Roy's school.
Sandro invited me to come to the school to do some nursing for some of the kids. He said that was a big need that they had.
El Roy says Alex and her young daughter were abducted from the aid organization's campus on Thursday. The same day, the U.S. State Department issued its highest-level travel advisory for Haiti, amid deteriorating conditions in the island nation since the assassination of Haiti's president in 2021. The United Nations noting at least 395 kidnappings reported during the first quarter of this year alone, warning of an increase in the targeting of teachers, students, parents, healthcare workers, and civil servants.
So it is strictly economic. And there's not drugs to be trafficked. There's not a whole lot of other ways to make money. So it's just the easiest way for a criminal gang to make large sums of money.
Keith Mines spent much of his State Department career in Haiti.
They can't think of when it's been quite this bad. It's just a real toxic situation because you've got gangs now out of control of the state that have taken over whole swaths of the city of Port-au-Prince.
Non-essential personnel have been ordered to leave as the United Nations says gangs now control 80% of Haiti's cities, and dozens of displaced Haitians camp outside the U.S. Embassy. One saying, "They killed people in our yard." Kenya has agreed to lead a UN-backed multinational force into Haiti after Security Council approval, and the U.S. has pledged support, though it is still unclear what that would look like.
I think it is something where there needs to be a force of the size and the capacity to do this well and really to intimidate these gangs that have gotten so powerful and they're so vicious and so well armed.
And tonight here in New England, prayers are going up for Alex, including from schools she attended nearby. Meantime, in a new statement, El Roy is noting her love of Haiti. They say she first went to Haiti after the 2010 earthquake before finally making it her home in 2020. Tom?
Okay, we hope they get her back, her and her child. Kristen Dahlgren for us. Now to an NBC News exclusive interview with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The interview following months of massive nationwide protest about his government's plans to weaken the country's judiciary. NBC's foreign correspondent Raf Sanchez sat down with Israel's chief executive.
Israel is a nation deeply divided. For months, hundreds of thousands of Israelis have taken to the streets, trying to stop Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's plan to weaken the Supreme Court. The protests weren't enough. Netanyahu driving the legislation through Parliament last week on a party line vote.
Prime Minister,
today, we sat down with the Prime Minister.
You successfully passed the first part of your legislation, but only after 6 months of mass protests that have left this country so divided. Israel's president has actually warned of the danger of civil war. Was it worth it?
There won't be civil war, I guarantee you that. But I think that correcting the imbalance in Israel's democracy, where the judiciary is basically arrogated to itself nearly all the powers of the executive branch and the legislature, I think, yes, it is important to do it. I think when the dust settles, people will see that Israel's democracy has been strengthened and not weakened.
Protesters don't believe that. They see the court as the only check on the power of the government and fear Israel is sliding away from democracy. The Supreme Court's judges could still strike down the legislation, in effect preserving their own power. But Netanyahu says he hopes that won't happen. For now, the political divisions have spread to Israel's famed military, with thousands of reservists saying they won't report for duty in protest at the new law.
The Israeli military said to me, if reservists do not show up for reserve duty in the long term, there will be damage to the military's readiness. What do you say to Israelis who are worried that the way you've passed this legislation is so divisive, it may actually impact national security?
I think it's unfortunate that you've had reservists being lined up for something that involves a political debate, because once Israel goes down that path, and former generals can tell you, listen, if you pass this legislation, or if you don't do as we say, we're going to incite military disobedience, then Israel stops being a democracy. That's a real threat to democracy, and I think we can't accept it.
Netanyahu hopeful about reaching a historic peace deal with Saudi Arabia. But peace with the Palestinians still far away. This year on track to be one of the bloodiest in the occupied West Bank in 2 decades. Human rights groups and several Democratic members of Congress like Rashida Tlaib say the situation there, where 2 million Palestinians live under Israeli military control but can't vote for Israel's government, amounts to apartheid. It's a label Netanyahu rejects.
Well, it's not apartheid. It's the Palestinians can vote for their own people. They can vote for their own parliament. They have their own flag, their own anthem, their own administration. The one thing they shouldn't have control over is security, because security means that they'll fall prey to terrorism and will fall prey to Iran's terrorist proxies.
Israel's longest-serving leader not backing down in a turbulent moment for his country.
All right, Raf Sanchez joins us tonight from Jerusalem. And Raf, I want to pick up on some of these tensions between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Biden, who's been critical of the Israeli leader at points. What did the Prime Minister tell you about the state of the U.S.-Israel relationship?
Tom, Netanyahu said the relationship has its ups and downs, but it's mainly ups. But there has been a lot of turbulence in recent weeks. President Biden made a very unusual plea to Netanyahu on the eve of the vote for this legislation, pleading with him to hit pause, not to push ahead without consensus. Netanyahu ignored him. He moved this legislation through Parliament on a party line vote. The president has also been critical of Netanyahu for including far-right members in his cabinet. The prime minister said whoever is in his cabinet, he is in charge. He is setting policy. The two leaders are going to have a chance to sit down later this year in the U.S., but even that's proving kind of controversial. Netanyahu says he has an invitation to go to the White House. The White House is not confirming that. They say they've yet to determine the location of that meeting.
You know, I do want to talk about also, and you mentioned this in the report as well, the issue of this peace deal between Saudi Arabia. If you can sort of bring our viewers up to speed about that and where that stands from there, from your interview with Netanyahu and what you understood he told you.
Yeah, Tom, these are unbelievably complex negotiations. Right now, the U.S. is dealing with the Saudis directly. The Israelis are not in the room, but they're being briefed by the Americans. And President Biden is showing real enthusiasm to try to get this deal done before the election. He sent some of his most senior aides to Saudi Arabia in the last week. The Saudis likely to have a bunch of demands from the U.S., including possibly civilian nuclear technology and American security guarantees. And from the Israelis, they may want concessions to the Palestinians. Now, the prime minister would not go into the details of these negotiations, but he said if this deal could be done, it would be historic and a landmark. Tom?
We're back now with the latest on a case that's captivated the country. The man charged with killing 3 women in the so-called Gilgo Beach murders is set to appear in court tomorrow as his wife speaks out about the case for the first time. Here's Stephanie Gosk.
When police arrested Rex Heuermann on a Manhattan street corner just over 2 weeks ago, the wife of the alleged serial killer was at the couple's home, where she lives with her 2 adult children. According to Asa Ellerup's attorney, who says the family is enduring a profound and indescribable catastrophe.
It's been a very tumultuous time for them. Life has been thrown upside down in the past few weeks. This was all brought on them all of a sudden out of nowhere.
Ellerup filed for divorce and is now asking for privacy for her children and her neighbors. They deserve to live peacefully, she writes. I am pleading with you all to give us space so that we may regain some normalcy in our neighborhood. In the days following the arrest, investigators poured through the family's Long Island home, removing truckloads of possible evidence, including, the DA says, nearly 300 guns. The small single-story house is just miles from where the bodies were discovered on Gilgo Beach over a decade ago. Heuermann is charged with killing 3 young women and is the main suspect in the disappearance of a 4th. The 59-year-old pleaded not guilty and has been held without bail, his attorney not responding to NBC News' request for comment. The prosecutor says it will take time to sift through new evidence, including what was found in 2 storage units nearby.
We have obtained a massive amount of material.
Rex Heuermann will be back in court tomorrow on Long Island. It will be brief. Among the topics being discussed, the prosecutor says, is whether there should be a formal bail hearing. Tom?
All right, we are back now with Top Stories news feed, and we begin with the shooting outside of a Hebrew academy in Memphis. Police say a man tried to enter the school with a gun but was not able to get inside. He reportedly fired gunshots outside the school but then took off in a truck. He was later pulled over by police when they say he exited the vehicle with the gun in hand. He was shot by an officer who was taken to the hospital. No one at the school, though, was hurt. A 17-year-old cyclist who was part of the U.S. men's junior national team was killed while training for the World Championship. Officials say Magnus White was hit by a car and killed while cycling near his home in Boulder. White was scheduled to compete in the cross-country World Championships in Scotland in August. Police say the driver crossed into the shoulder, striking White. So far, no word yet on any charges. And a plane crash landing in the water near a crowded New Hampshire beach over the weekend. Look at this video showing the terrifying moments. A propeller plane crashes into the water, sending the tail of the plane in the air. Now, it's pretty incredible. Neither the pilot nor any beachgoers were injured in this crash. No word yet on what exactly happened there. We want to head overseas now and to the unrest in Africa. Today, the president of Niger appeared for the first time publicly since he was ousted in an apparent coup. Our Courtney Cuby is the only U.S.-based journalist inside the war-torn country and reports from there tonight.
Tonight, the first glimpse of Niger's democratically elected president, Mohamed Bazoum. Not seen since last week after a coup. Bazoum smiling, meeting with the leader of Chad, who's now trying to mediate in Niger after several West African countries called on the coup leaders to give up power, warning them to release President Bazoum in the next week or face possible military action.
Such measures may include the use of force.
Over the weekend, thousands took to the streets of the capital here, mostly peaceful, supporting the coup. Some waving Russian flags chanting, "Long live Russia." Though violence erupted outside the French embassy, crowds burning a door and throwing rocks at windows, chased off by tear gas before they could breach the outer walls. Tonight, the coup leaders have not responded to the ultimatum, vowing to defend Niger from aggression, accusing France of planning a military intervention. Both France and the U.S. have military bases here in Niger. Adding to the tensions, should the U.S. designate this as a coup, more than $400 million in U.S. aid and military training would immediately be at risk.
Any questions?
Eroding years of U.S.-Nigerian partnership, training to combat terror groups here.
Okay, we thank Courtney Cuby for that. And coming up next, a deadly typhoon slamming northern China. Video showing the terrifying moments a man clinging to his car as floodwaters raged around him. That dramatic rescue next. All right, we're back now with Top Stories Global Watch. We begin with the death of a French daredevil during a stunt gone wrong. Authorities in Hong Kong say 30-year-old Remy Lucidi, known on social media as Remy Enigma, fell from the 68th floor of a high-rise apartment building. One resident calling police after claiming Lucidi knocked on his window for help right before falling. He was known for scaling skyscrapers all over the world and posting his climbs on Instagram. And a powerful typhoon slamming northern China. New video shows a man clinging to a car that was tumbling around in raging floodwaters. A helicopter crew eventually reaching the man and airlifting him to safety. The typhoon is one of the strongest storms to hit China in years, causing roads to collapse in Beijing. So far, at least 2 people have died and thousands of people have been evacuated. Okay, time now for the Americas and the scandal rocking Colombia following the arrest of President Gustavo Petro's son, Nicolas. He's been charged with laundering funds used to illegally finance his father's presidential campaign. This just the latest blow to Petro's already rocky first year in office. NBC's Allison Barber has this story.
Tonight, a shocking fall from grace for the son of Colombia's president. Nicolas Petro, in a white baseball cap, flanked by security forces, hurried into a waiting SUV, no longer a free man. Colombian authorities arrested the 34-year-old congressman on charges related to money laundering and illicit enrichment. His ex-wife also in custody on similar charges.
There is an element here. There is a presidente, which is he's the son of a sitting president. What's different here also is that Gustavo Petro is the first left-leaning president of Colombia. So there has been a lot of meaning to his presidency.
The trouble started earlier this year with the younger Petro's ex-wife making shocking allegations on the Colombian news magazine show Semana. She claimed drug traffickers gave Nicholas money for his father's presidential campaign. A problem for a president who campaigned on massive social reform and changing the status quo. She said the president did not know about the donations at all, and on top of it, she claimed Nicholas did not even use the funds as promised. Instead, she says he used them to fund a lavish lifestyle. Nicholas, an elected political leader himself, denied the accusations, calling them unfounded and harmful.
Señor Trujillo, gracias por acompañarnos. Buenos días.
Today, his attorney reiterating his client's innocence, telling a local radio station the alleged drug trafficking donors also deny the claims. As for Nicholas's father, Colombian President Gustavo Petro, he took to X, formerly known as Twitter, to express the pain of seeing his son under arrest and vow not to interfere, writing in part, quote, "To my son, I wish luck and strength. As I affirmed to the Attorney General, I will not intervene nor pressure his decisions. May the law freely guide the process."
President Petro has not been accused of any wrongdoing in this particular situation, but given that it is his son, what will this mean for him in the weeks to come?
The chances of the party of President Petro and the political parties that are closer to President Petro are probably going to suffer. It's possible that they may suffer in elections. But the point is that he's weaker politically right now than he was when he was elected a year ago.
And with that, Ellison Barber now joins us on set. So, Ellison, those accusations from the ex-wife to that TV news magazine show in Colombia obviously carried something, because from there you're saying the timeline, that's sort of when the investigation started?
Yeah, I mean, it sort of seemed to be one of the first dominoes to fall, if you will. This is a really big deal politically, because we have to remember the context of what this president means for this country. He is the first leftist-leaning president elected there in many, many years. I think it is actually ever. He is one of the new leftist presidents in Latin America. He has a huge reform agenda. And speaking with experts, they say because it is so rare to have a left-leaning politician in this country, in some ways the standards for him are higher. They say, look, the opposition party, they've dealt with scandals as well, but this holds more weight, even though the president is not involved directly in it, at least based on what we know right now, because there's a lot of pressure on him, given this new kind of unprecedented role he's taken in the country of Colombia. He wants to reform their healthcare system in that country. He has a total peace plan where he's trying to coalesce fighting guerrilla groups moving forward. He cannot do that if he doesn't have a strong coalition in Congress. And regional elections, they're just around the corner, 3 months away from now.
A big blow to Colombia's first leftist president. All right, Ellison Barber, we thank you for that. Coming up, a nurse leaving work later than usual and ended up saving a truck driver's life. How she managed to treat him on the side of an Arizona highway, we'll show you. Finally tonight, going beyond the call of duty, an Arizona nurse on her way home from work when she stopped to help a truck driver after a crash on a highway. Her quick thinking actions likely saving his life. Jonathan McCall from our Phoenix affiliate KPNX has this story.
You never know.
There's days where sometimes things are a little bit more calm,
where a path will lead.
And I was hoping that today was going to be one of those days.
For nurse Leanne Sundrup.
And so I walked out at 7:30, which is a little bit later than I normally leave.
The path home from work Wednesday morning.
If the calling's there and a need arises, that's what we do. That's what nurses do.
Led her to being in the right place at the right time.
He told me, he goes, "I'm going to die." And I said, "No, you're not." I said, "Not today. You're not going to die today."
The driver of a cement truck trapped inside after a rollover crash near Phoenix Sky Harbor. The driver quickly losing blood from injuries to his foot and leg. The 6-year nurse pulling over her car and springing into action.
There were some other bystanders, some men that were there, and I called out for a belt. And somebody got me a belt, and I applied that belt as a rough tourniquet.
The driver, alive and now in stable condition, all thanks to her quick action. Basic first aid, she says, is a path that everyone should take.
There's a Stop the Bleed class that's available, a number of places that can help save lives. I did not have a fancy tourniquet. You know, we used a belt. But these are all things that anybody can learn to do.
It's a path that she says can help save lives just like she did without ever having to put on nurses' scrubs.
Our thanks to our Phoenix affiliate, KPNX, for their help on that story. And we thank you for watching Top Story tonight. I'm Tom Llamas in New York. Stay right there. More news on the way.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.